Hello, my name is Walter Noason. I'm the Life Sciences Product Manager for IndySoft. Prior to IndySoft, I was a Senior Engineering Manager for the Calibration Department for Medtronic, the largest medical device manufacturer in the world. Welcome to today's Tip Tuesday on the History Chart module. The History Chart is a useful tool to track the timeline difference between two workflow events with a start and end type of design. At Medtronic, for example, we use the history chart to track our CalLab's monthly calibration turnaround time using our workflow receive event as the start trigger and the subsequent calibration completed event as the end trigger. Now let's go ahead and go over the overview of the history chart module. You can start by finding it in the right menu panel on your home screen. So I'm on my home screen and not on the equipment view screen. If you go down to the middle of the panel, the menu panel on the right, scheduling and performance, you'll find it, history charts, about the fourth item down, and you click on the name. And your screen will come up. The first tab is the equipment filter tab. Think of it as a pre-filtering trigger for your metric chart. Here's where you would filter out or narrow down your database selection. For example, if you wanted your monthly cal metric to only be for certain departments, not your entire database, then you'd come down here and check the conditions, and I'm looking for the department, and you select it and whatever criteria for departments. That way you've narrowed down what this chart is going to look at from your database. But you can just leave it blank as well, certainly. Go to tab 2, which is the start filter, which event is going to start the triggering for your metric. And I'm going to use an example that I have tested, called the check-in. And then we go to our third tab, which is the end trigger event, what's going to stop the measuring. And I'll do the check out event. Okay. Now for each one of these, you can have additional criteria that you could evaluate, like equipment statuses and such. But for my simple example I'll be using today, we just keep it simple. But just so you know that this area down here is very similar to the equipment finder search engine, where you could further filter out your selection. Go to the fourth tab. There's two useful items here. One is exclude all events with day difference greater than, and the default's to 60. We're going to change it to 120. But the default of 60 is good for most situations. Think of this as a way to filter out the outliers that are causations of errors based on certain looks in the database. You'll get used to, as you do your particular metric more often, when you learn what is a good number for this. 60 is probably a good way to start. 90 and 120 are some good alternates. I'm going to use 120. Display information using end event is the default, and that's a good one to use. Your other choice is the start. I have found the start not as useful, because if you can think of it like if I'm doing a monthly cal turnaround for June, and I do the start on the receive event in June, well, July hasn't happened yet, and maybe I get calibrations that have not been completed in June or are still out there. So they're not going to end, and this metric won't find them. So that's why the end event trigger is a good one to use and experiment with, because it will at least capture everything that did happen in June, because that's the end. That makes sense? Yeah. All right. So now that we've got those criteria identified, the way you execute your trigger to get the results in your report plot is to go all the way to the right and hit the create button, and then it'll execute. And you can see that it'll give you notice the report and graph have been created, and they automatically pre-populate in the report grid. Now, for my Medtronic example, our monthly metric for calibration turnaround time would have like 1,000 events. In this case, there's only like 8, and it happened right away. But for 1,000 events, if you can think about it trying to find all of those, it's going to take a little bit of time, so be patient. It may take 10 to 15 minutes to complete a search of your entire database. But what's nice is that this works behind the scenes. So you can do other work in the database or on your computer while this is running in the background. It will not stop unless you actually exit. So yeah, that's a nice feature. It can work in the background. In this case here, it gave me all the information of the data of the equipment items that resulted. Got a column here, the days between, how many days. So I got 0 for most of them, but I do have one that was 69. Hence the reason why I changed 60 to 120, because I knew I had that. And then you have the event dates and end dates. So you can see that, yeah, from November to January, 69 days, that makes sense. And then your rest of your item information. Now, as you know from your previous Tip Tuesday learnings, whenever you see a spreadsheet grid in IndySoft, if you right-click on it, you can have a lot of choices you can do with this information. Certainly the most useful is to save your grid to an Excel spreadsheet file. That would be highly recommended, especially if you have 1,000 results, because then you can do a lot more amazing things with the spreadsheet when you open it back up, such as using a pivot table to do a lot more sorting of your data, which I found very useful. But you can also print the grid right away if you want to have some hard copy record. Highly recommend you do one or the other, print or save, because it will not remember this information once you exit out of the history chart module. Now, the other thing down here at the bottom that you'll see is once the results come in here, it automatically gives you some information here, like the count. The total item count is 8. The average number of days is 8.63. Automatically does that. If you think of the benefit of for our monthly cal metric at Medtronic, where I had over 1,000 to 2,000 results, to see an average come down automatically when it was done, that was pretty cool. And then you have a min number of days. In this case, it's 0. And then the max number of days is 69. So a nice automatic summary of what's going on here at the top. So pretty cool. I'm going to go do this again just so you can kind of see what's going on. So we go back to equipment filter. Remember, this is a pre-selection, pre-filtering, narrowing down your criteria. If you only want to do departments, a couple of departments, this is just one example of the pre-filtering. Go to start filter, and I'm going to select another event, a start and stop of ones that I've that we can do here. Do the check-in, go to my end trigger, select the appropriate end event. And that would be the checkout. And oh, by the way, the events you pick in the start and end have to be different. You cannot trigger on same type of events, unfortunately. That would be very useful, it could, but it does not. So just remember that. I'm going to leave the options the same, okay? And then I'm going to execute and look at the results automatically. It'll change. Boom, done. Of course, it was only one item. I knew it would only be one. This case, the summary comes down here. It's one item, average 7 days, min is 7, max is 7, because it's just one item, 7-day difference. The start date, end date, and what the item is that evoked this trigger of this metric, and so on and so forth. So very nice. Once again, the history chart module is a nice way to be able to check your database for your workflow design on start trigger and end trigger events, such as send to vendor, receive from vendor, or check in or check out a tool crib, or receive into your lab condition for either calibration, repair, or PMs. And based on your event type equipment trigger, you could be looking for those criteria. So once again, a very useful tool for checking those metrics in your database. It is predicated on workflow design. You need to have start and end sort of design. But hope you experiment with the history chart module and get some good results out of it. Thanks for listening to our Tip Tuesday today.